I almost hate to interrupt you all.
Mark would be so excited to know that you are so excited to be together. So thank you so very, very much for being here today. This is not the first time for me to do a memorial service. But I will have to say to you, this is the first time that I've done a memorial service for somebody who was part of a college group that met in my home for about 8 years. It was the best group of young adults I've ever hung out with in my life. And so as much as I think I have all of my emotions under control, I cannot swear to you that it will be that way this entire day. And in the midst of any emotions that may be shown, please understand the overshadowing emotion is great joy that I know where Mark is today. I had the wonderful privilege of being in Mark and Jennifer's home last year and being able to spend just some time with the two of them. And it was that day that Mark shared with me the greatest compliment that I have ever been given. And I will cherish that from that day forward. And I'm not going to tell you what it was, simply because that was between us that day. But it was most special, and I will always cherish it. And I'm glad family's here. Not all of his family could be here. Many of them are in Southern California. They'll be having a gathering down there next month. But for those of you who are from this area and you are part of the family, thank you so very much for being together. Family need each other on days like today. You share some common love and common memories that nobody else can share with you. And so thank you for being a support system to each other. The vast majority of you are friends, and thank you for being here. It's important to Jennifer. I have a sneaking suspicion, even to the 3 kids sitting right here, you have no idea who most of these friends are. You know who a few of them are, but you have no idea who most of them are. But I hope you'll be encouraged, all right? Not by their looks, but by the number of them, all right? Because that's how well your dad was liked and loved and cared about up here in this area. And y'all are a church, and I'm a pastor, and I have a bias, and I say this almost in every service. I'm glad God shows up at every one of these services. He makes a promise to us in the Scriptures. It's a promise that's thousands of years old. And the promise is this. He says, I am the God of all comfort. I had thought for a couple of weeks in prepping for today that the sermon today was going to be different than what it turned out to be. I thought I was going to attempt to answer the most challenging question of life, and that is, why do things like this happen? And that's a theological answer that would be so boring to talk about today. And when Jennifer told me what Mark's 2 favorite scripture verses were, I knew what I was going to talk about today. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But God made a promise that in this world that is not fair, which is what I really wanted to chat about today, how unfair sometimes life is. But in this world that is very unfair, God makes some promises. And 2 of those promises are found in Mark's favorite scriptures. And the other one is the scripture where he says, I am the God of all comfort. When you go through sorrow, when you go through trouble, when you go through pain, when you go through things that are unfair in this world, I am available to be your source of comfort. He never forces comfort on any of us. He offers it. And it'll be up to us whether we choose to accept his comfort or not. Mark could have been ugly and bitter, and I know at times he was annoyed and frustrated. But I also saw him in peace, the kind of peace that his favorite scripture verse talks about, and that we will look at in a few minutes. And so God is here to make the difference for all of us. As most of you know, Mark was a computer geek. Okay? And that was a big part of what his life was. So let me see if I can set perspective with a bit of a geek story. All right? 2 young engineers applied for a single position at a computer company. They both had identical qualifications. In order to determine which one they would hire, the applicants were asked to take a very specialized test by the department manager. Upon completion of the test, both men missed only one question, and it was the same question. The manager went to the first applicant and said, "Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to give the job to the other applicant." And that man looked at the boss and said, "Why would you do that?" We both got 9 questions correct. We both missed the same question. Why did you choose him over me? And they said, well, we've based our decision not on the correct answer, but on the wrong answer that each of you gave. And the guy said, I don't understand. How could one incorrect answer be better than the other one? Simple, said the manager. Your fellow applicant put down for question 5, I don't know. You put down, neither do I. Perspective is very important in life. And how we approach the matters of life and living, and how we approach the matter of death and dying, and how we approach the matter of what's on the other side of death is going to be our perspective. And God would love to give us some direction on how we shape the perspective of all of those things in our lives. And I think Mark would be very pleased if we allowed this day, this moment, this time when we gathered and we're making him the center of attention today. And he would have hated that. But as we make him the center of our attention, he would be so thrilled to know that this day could have a difference in the way in which we live the rest of our lives. So let's jump in and talk about Mark Andrew Gerlach. He was born 48 years ago in Anaheim, California on December the 31st, 1972. He was the perfect tax deduction baby, okay? December the 31st. Do you know what day of the week your husband was born on? Do not feel bad. I've asked that question several hundred times now, and I've only had 2 people know, and they were moms, all right? Moms tend to remember the day they gave birth, all right? But nobody else. He was born on a Sunday. Mark did not want to miss one day of the week, so he jumped right in on the first day. Richard Nixon happened to be president at the time of his birth. There were some classic movies that came out on the big screen in 1972. It was a good vintage year for movies. Godfather, the first one, all right, with Pacino and Brando and Keaton in it. The Candidate, that was a racy movie in 1972, and that had Robert Redford in it. The Getaway with Steve McQueen and Ali McGraw. Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean with Paul Newman and Ava Gardner and Clint Eastwood. Anybody know? Joe Kidd. Close. You were close. Joe Kidd. Hit songs came out that year. There was a pretty good year for some rock and roll that year. Roberta Flack came out with The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, little romantic ditty. Gilbert O'Sullivan had Alone Again. Good job, Naturally. Sammy Davis Jr. had The Candyman. Looking Glass had Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. Way to go, Mike, over there. All right. And Neil Diamond had Song Sung Blue. So those were the hit songs at the time he was born. He also shared his birthday, December 31st. Not always the same year, but December 31st with some pretty impressive folks. Maybe he got his musical talent from John Denver, because John Denver was born on January 31st. Ben Kingsley, born in 1943, the actor. Here's my favorite, though, I think, Val Kilmer. They shared the same birthday. You got to remember, Doc Holliday, Tombstone, I'll be your Huckleberry. Nicholas Sparks, the writer, all right, 1965, and then I don't know if this will be a good one or a bad one, depends on your political persuasion, but he and Donald Trump Jr. shared the same birthday, all right, the son of the previous president. Mark's parentage is an interesting story. Some of you probably know bits and pieces of it. Maybe you don't know all of it, but it's an interesting story. Mark was adopted at 6 months of age by Richard and Irma Gerlach. And Irma preceded Mark in her death, and Richard is currently in a care facility in Southern California. Mark's birth parents were young and not married, and they were very unsure what their future would look like. And they wanted something that was far more certain for their son than what they thought they would be able to provide. And so he was adopted. Years later, Steve and Kathy, the birth mom and dad, they became husband and wife. And they had 3 more children. Evan Schultz and his wife Christine live in Bellevue, Washington. Caitlin Schultz and Keith, Caitlin and Keith live in Redondo Beach. All right, and Allie lives in Studio City, California. And 21 years ago, after Mark and Jennifer were married, there was a reconnection with Steve and Kathy, and it was an exciting time for Mark. You'll hear more about that involvement over the next few minutes. Mark grew up in Tustin, California, where the Gerlachs were his parents and guided him through those formative years. He went to Foothill High School. He participated in band and football and drama. He graduated in 1991. He chose to continue his education at Fresno State because he had a friend from Southern California who was attending here, and the tuition was much more affordable here than at USC or UCLA. And I'm so glad he did, because it was towards the end of his time at Fresno State that he found his way to New Hope Church. And it was about that time that we had just launched a college and career class here at New Hope, and it was meeting at my home. It was there where Jennifer Cope, in 1996, met Mark Gerlach. So I take a lot of credit for their marriage. And in fact, if you want to find out, on your way over for the reception later, as you step over the curb going into the new building, you will find a brick, all right, that's lined in that sidewalk that is going to have their names on it, and it says, "Started here and will last forever," all right? And so it all got started here in 1996. In fact, out of that college group that sometimes was as many as 40 young adults at our home every Sunday night, they showed up at 5. That was playtime, all right? There was a trampoline, a batting cage, a swimming pool, and a volleyball net, and a lot of lounge chairs. From 6 to 7, it was dinner, and it could be anything from pizza to barbecued hamburgers to tri-tip. I'm really disappointed that barbecue spaghetti was not on Mark's favorite food list, because one Sunday evening I made spaghetti, and I didn't realize I had no no spaghetti sauce in the house. But I did have 2 cans of barbecue sauce. And from then on, they wanted spaghetti with barbecue sauce as part of the menu. So anyway, we had 9 couples out of that college group that got married. It was an incredible group of young men and young women. They dated less than 2 years and got married on January 3rd, 1998. Their 23 years of marriage was blessed with a son and 2 daughters. Devin, who was a student at Grand Canyon, you just finished your second year, so you will be a junior next year. Kelsey is graduating in about a month and heading to Biola next fall. And then Ashley, you are finishing the 8th grade and heading to high school next year. So very important years for all 3 of you. Mark and Jen moved to Tustin from Fresno. And by the way, after they got married, they also were our neighbors for a while when we lived out in the country. Mark and Jen moved to Tustin in 2011, and it has been their home ever since. Mark was very smart, and he was tech savvy. Mark was the kind of men I love to hate. Smart, tall, and good-looking. He was driven and he was hardworking. His skills in the computer world, with the ability to write software and programs and manage hardware, made it possible for Mark to be successful, whether he worked for himself doing his own business or whether he could become a valuable asset working for others. And he did both. He had the wonderful opportunity of working for and with his birth dad, the dad that he didn't see for several years in his growing up and formative years. They developed a relationship. His dad had a company called Schultz Steel. They manufactured big products for aerospace projects and aircraft. And for the last 7 years, Mark got to work with his dad in that company. Mark's hobbies: he was a gifted musician. Again, another reason for me to hate him. He could sing, play the piano, play the drums, and several different kinds of guitars. The only good thing was he couldn't do all those things at once. Okay? He had to divide it up. So the guitar here is an evidence of that. And Mark and his son Devin helped us build the building that you're going to have a meal in after this service is over. We launched that building project with a big barbecue out on the grass 2 years ago. And Devin handcrafted and made a guitar for us to auction off that day. And we did. We made some good money on that guitar, And the beautiful thing was, you got it back, didn't you? Yeah. And your dad didn't even have to pay for it, though he tried, all right? But he got outbid. That was hilarious. At the table, Mark is sitting there during the auction, and he keeps raising his hand as people all around are putting a bid in. And then it's down to just two people, and it's his dad, and there's a guy who's standing behind him. It's Ray Steele from our church. Mark could not see the guy behind him, and Ray just kept running it up, and there was no way Mark was going to run it up past what Ray could afford to pay. And then after Ray received it, he presented it to Mark as a gift. So thank you all for the way in which you helped make that possible. Mark also had perfect pitch. Somebody could hum a bar of a song, and then he would begin to play it on the piano. He didn't need to have the music in front of him. He also was gifted with computer coding. He loved work so much that it was also his hobby, and he would just write programs for fun. Somehow that doesn't even seem possible, but it was for him. And then I did not know this about Mark. He loved yo-yos. Let's see if I can do this. Well, almost. All right. But anyway, you all are going to get a yo-yo. They're on the table over in the reception area, and it has engraved on one side of the yo-yo Philippians 4:6 and 4:13. And so that'll be a gift from the family to you. Mark is a family man, loved to visit Disneyland and Disney World, and you'll see some pictures in a few minutes of both places with the family together there. And when it was just him and Jennifer with a chance to get away, he loved the beach, relaxing with Jennifer under a palapa structure. I didn't know what one of those were. She had to explain it to me. I said, "Oh, you mean the thatch roof?" But that's what a palapa structure is on the beach. And my wife and I, Shelley, we're heading to Mexico Monday, so we're gonna get under a palapa just in honor of Mark next week. Okay. His favorite foods, this was kind of surprised, restaurant and fast food. That was it, restaurant and fast food. So it wasn't Jennifer's cooking, all right? She could order in, but that was obviously before he even married you. That was his favorite. So that made it easy for you, didn't it? Let's delivery service. Favorite dessert was ice cream, and it was one that he made himself. And if I screw this up, you can correct me, Jen. All right. Vanilla ice cream that he would buy at the store, but he changed it. He would get powdered Nesquik chocolate. Had to be powdered. Couldn't be the kind you squeeze out of a bottle. Powdered Nesquik chocolate, and he would mix it together, and he called it cake batter ice cream. Did I get it right? Okay, and that was his favorite dessert. His favorite restaurants were not in Southern California. They were here in Fresno, all right? Bobby Salazar's, Me and Ed's for pizza, and DeChico's for a calzone. Shelley and I just shared a calzone DeChico's Thursday night. Thought about Mark. I thought about food over there for tonight. I thought about ordering Bobby Salazar's plate, Me and Ed's pizza, and DeChico's calzones. Instead, y'all are going to have to put up with freshly made tri-tip, rice pilaf, salad, and desserts, all right? His favorite things to watch on TV, he and I would have never fought for the clicker. He loved NCIS and CIS cop dramas. His favorite music was rock, and he loved a group called Rush. The most important part of Mark's life, though, at least from my perspective, and I think Mark would agree with this, is the fact is that he had a relationship with Jesus Christ. He had a religious upbringing, but one of the things that he shared in the visit in the home with them last year was what a difference it made when he understood what a relationship with Jesus Christ was all about during his time here at New Hope. He said, to understand that is what made all the difference in the world of my life. During Mark's years here, he was an asset wherever he got engaged. In our music department, he was part of our music team at times. He assisted Jan Parsnow, who was our worship leader during most of the time in which he was here. And Jan sends her best. She sent me a text 10 minutes before we started. She had just moved to Texas and tore her meniscus. So hi Jan, she's probably watching on live stream right now. But He taught Jan how to do a lot of things on a computer that she did not know how to do before that made a difference in her music. Mark's faith continued to blossom after they left the Clovis area and ended up back in Southern California, where they were regular attenders and members at Voyagers Bible Church in Irvine. I already shared with you his favorite scriptures found in the book of Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 and 13. And you'll be able to remember that when you take a yo-yo home. Those two key verses read like this: do not be anxious about anything. That even means on days like today. But in every situation, by prayer and petition, with a heart of gratitude, with thanksgiving, present your requests, your needs to God. In verse 13, I can do all things through Christ, who is my strength. As Jen and I visited on the phone, I asked her to share a few words with me that just pop in her mind that would describe Mark's personality, and I'll give some of you a chance to pop off right where you're seated. But here are the words that she shared. He was generous, sometimes to a fault. He was goofy. He was a genius. He was sensitive. The smartest thing he ever did was marry you too, right? That shows you how smart he was. He was sensitive. He was compassionate. He was loving. He was talented. He was smart. He was kind. He was God-fearing and Christ-trusting. He could be a bit stubborn. Did I downplay that just a little bit? All right. He was very easygoing, except for the occasions when he was being very stubborn. He was friendly, and he was very, very hardworking. Any other single words just pop in your mind that describe Mark for you? Just shout out where you are. Joyful. Loving. Curious. Yeah. He had a good mind. He asked tough questions sometimes, this college group. As other things come to your mind, there are going to be cards on the table in the reception area, scattered about the table. And there'll be pens on the table as well. Those were provided by Jennifer. As you have thoughts, stories, words about Mark that come to your mind, jot them down on the card and just leave them on the table. And when the reception is over, we'll pick up all those cards and we'll give them to Jennifer and the kids to be able to share together once they're home. So they would love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to take the card with you and spend some time thinking about it, you can do that. And if you have Jennifer's home address, you can certainly mail those cards to them, or you can mail them back here to the church or drop them off, and we will see that they get them. To share a couple of other perspectives are a couple of friends. We're going to start with Shelley Rude Banta, part of that infamous college group. So Shelley, come on up. Much different in height, but it makes me feel better if I lower it just a little, but for somebody. For somebody.
Got little heels on. I can do all things through He who strengthens me. I had big plans, but I don't know if I can get through this. I'm going to do it, though. Okay. So, yes, as Tim said, I'm Shelley. And Mark and I go way back to our college days. We were among a handful of those that founded that original college group that had some amazing times. And we used to get together and have lunch at Piccadilly Inn Airport and talk about our non-existent love lives and how we just had to hang in there and the right person would come along. And, of course, they did. And fast forward a couple of years, and, we're college group, and one of the big things we used to do was go play pool. I think it was classic billiards, on Shaw, okay. And, Mark was tall, good-looking dude, really confident, until he met little Miss Jennifer Cope over here. Then it was like he took him to his knees. So we're playing pool, and he's, peacocking a little bit, I'm cool, I'm big. And then whenever Jen would, concentrate on her shot, he's like, Jen's cute. I'm like, yeah, I know, okay. Oh. And then Jen would take another shot. Shelley, I really think Jen's cute. I'm like, okay, I know, Mark, it's okay, And then finally, it's like, Shelley, I really want to ask Jen out. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, dude, go for it. So, Tim took a little bit of credit, but, you're welcome. I take some credit for the coupling here, So the rest is history, you know. And of course, I met my husband, and we were so fortunate to become lifelong friends. And Mark and Dawn had a special bond, and Jen, and I consider Jen one of my dearest friends, and we watched our kids grow up together, and it's just been amazing. So I will always cherish that. Fast forward, you know, a few more years, and this is the story I really wanted to tell. And it's actually really fitting that Tim shared his favorite dessert was ice cream, because that's where I'm going with this. We were sitting around one night eating ice cream, and all of a sudden I hear, and I think it triggered some kind of childhood trauma from my dad clinking, his sugar in his coffee cup, And I'm like, what the heck is happening? And so I must have given Mark a funny look, because he's like, what? I got to get all my goodness. Because he had to get every little bit of his Nesquik cake batter ice cream out of his bowl. So I just thought it was hilarious. And so that's kind of been an ongoing joke ever since. He's always got to get his goodness. And so when I think of Mark and everything that's gone on and how we lost him too soon, and my human nature wants to tell me it's not fair. He didn't get all his goodness. Why? Why did he get taken? But my faith tells me that he's now getting all his goodness. He's getting all the goodness of our Heavenly Father. And I picture him sitting up there, clinking away, eating a big old bowl of cake batter ice cream. And it's kind of like in that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, when you hear a bell and an angel gets his wings. So now that when you hear a clink or when you hear a bell, it's Mark eating ice cream. So, like Tim mentioned, we always ask the why question. And it's hard to answer, but I like to think of it as this. And this is the reason why I shared this story. As evident by his beautiful family and his faith and his everything that he's given to everyone in his life, and just his undying strength and faith that he displayed through everything that he went through. It's evident, and the answer is, God took him home because he gave all his goodness. He gave his goodness. And he was a dear friend. He will always be a dear friend of mine. And I'll miss him until we're reunited in heaven. He loved unconditionally. I didn't shout it out because it was more than one word, but unconditional love. The people in his life, he loved unconditionally. I mean, those of you who know me, I'm goofy. I say dumb things. But I will never forget him always laughing at all my stupid jokes and ending it with, I love you, Shell. I love you, Shell. So I will always miss that, but I will always hear, I love you, Shell. And so to wrap it up, my challenge to you guys, love the Lord, keep the faith, and next time you go to the freezer to get out that ice cream, to heck with the plastic bowls, no to paper bowls, get the glass or the porcelain and clink away and think of Mark. I love you, big guy. Thank you.
And Shelley, thank you for doing that with the ice cream bowl, because now my Shelley could not get mad at me when I do that with the bowl at the house. She wears hearing aids, and it drives her nuts when I do that on the bowl. And now I'm just going to look and say, remember Mark? Remember Mark? Hey. All right. Jim Wood was not part of this college group. Well, yeah, sort of. Yeah. He got brought in kind of after the fact, he and his wife. It was through Dawn. Shelley brought Dawn. Dawn was the good-looking neighbor across the street from Shelley's house. She talked about him in college group a few weeks before she brought him, talked about how good-looking he was washing the car without his shirt on. And as a result, we got to meet Jim and Julie. And so that was thrilling. Jim, come up and share your thoughts about Mr. Mark.
I was going to have a problem following you. I was crying. Shelly gets all the tears going. That was rude. That was rude.
You can't help it.
I know. Well, before I get started, those of you who know me know how much I would not do this for anybody. Anybody but that guy. Except Mark. You turkey. Man, Bill. I noticed you didn't raise the microphone for me, Tim.
Because I knew you were going to put a Dodger shirt on. And while you're raising that, it's the only reason I wore a suit today, because I was debating whether to be casual or very dressy. But this is the closest to Dodger blue I could get.
Fair enough. So, wow. Collect myself here for a second, because work on this for a couple months, and here we are. So, first of all, if there was one thing Mark really loved, okay, so I'm going to back up a second. First of all, I'm pretty good at public speaking. I do it fairly occasionally. I had to write every word out to keep myself from being a blubbering idiot up here today. So I'm just going to follow my notes as closely as possible, because there's a lot of stuff in here I want to get through and honor my friend with. So if there was one thing Mark really loved, besides, of course, his family and his friends, is laughter. Mark loved to laugh. So, again, I wouldn't do this for anybody, but I know and I hope that he's laughing right now, seeing me struggling to fit into his Dodger jersey, which is kind of tight. I ate as much as I could yesterday to try to fill it out. It didn't work. So the first time I saw Mark was in the spring of 1998. He was helping bus tables at my cousin, Don, and Shelley's rehearsal dinner that was held just up the street at the Copeland home. I didn't get a chance to meet him that night, but that would soon change. Fast forward a couple months, and a group of us way past college age, we're in a college and career group. Yeah, Tim, I was there. Whatever. I was there. Whatever. We were. And we were at Pastor Tim's house. And I think most of that group's here today. Don, Shelley, Julie, myself. Brandon, Janine are back there. Nathan's over there. Yeah. Huh? Carrie, is Carrie here? Hi, Carrie. I didn't see you. And Mark drove the cutest little red Jeep back then. And as I got to know him, I got to love him. There were things about him that would drive me absolutely crazy, like when I asked him a question about anything, and he replied with, basically. All I heard after that word was, blah, blah, donut, blah, blah. His answers may have been basic to him, but it was far from it for me. He'd see me gloss over and chuckle and say, I lost you, huh? Well, duh. Then he'd say, basically. And the whole process would start over again, and that would just drive me crazy. Some here may not know that Mark was on the game show Hollywood Squares. He was like the all-time money winner when his run was done. He won a PT Cruiser, a TiVo, remember the TiVo? And all sorts of early cool 2000s era stuff. His favorite square was Bobcat Goldthwait, who got suspended from the show for answering correctly what Michael Jackson's favorite pastime was. You can see me afterwards, or you can go look it up yourself. I can't say it in church. Early on, Mark, Don, and I would always seem to be helping each other with one home improvement project or another. A couple of them are just too good to not bring up here. For starters, I think it was around 2001 when Jen called me in a panic, telling me to get Don and get our tails over to their house. Mark was in the process of taking out, he was demolishing, that's a better word, demolishing. He was demolishing their spa with a chainsaw. I didn't hesitate and went over to Don's in shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops. He looked at me and just shook his head, and he threw me some extra coveralls that he had, because, everybody has extra coveralls just laying around their house. Goggles, shoes, gloves. I think he even had a face mask for me. My next words, safety first. Boom. Don had a much better idea of what we were getting into than either Mark or myself. We showed up at the house, and it was like the scene from Edward Scissorhands when the pruning in the bushes was going on in the backyard, and there was stuff flying all over the fence. Jen gave us that look and took us out back, and there was Mark in shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops, and covered in spa parts. He just looked up and said, "Hey!" It was at that moment I was really glad Don was there. Several tools later, proper tools and a lot of sweat, the spa was in the trash, or at least the parts we could fit anyways. Mark would always say he was the ultimate grunt when it came to yard work. Just point me where I need to go, how much I need to dig, and what you want gone. Don did exactly that one day while we were putting in his backyard sprinklers. Point, dig, go. Pickaxe or trenching shovel, which one you want? Mark chose the pickaxe and was doing so well he didn't know he was backing up to the fence until the pickaxe went right through it. I might mention that Mark was also wearing t-shirt, shorts, and flip-flops for this activity. And then there was the story that will live on in infamy. Mark bought a new Harley from a guy in town. It was a big, heavy thing with fixed saddlebags, and it was beautiful. And after a test ride, we were getting ready to load it up in the truck. The seller asked Mark if he had any motorcycle straps. Confidently, Mark said, "No, but I have some." Now, personally, I'd never moved a bike like this, but I was fairly certain twine wasn't going to cut it, so no matter how much we had. And it turned out we didn't have much. And the seller was gracious enough to allow Mark to use the straps, and the bike was trekked across town without incident. Chapter 4. I'm not sure there was a day that went by after that where we didn't try to work in, well, I have some twine, into the conversation. I had a couple nicknames for Mark. There was Marcus Aurelius Gerlachticus of the Northern Armies, which he inherited after the movie Gladiator was released. To the Wood and Banta kids, he was Uncle Mark, a name that was bestowed very early on and always stuck. Darn it. All right, I brought tissue and I can't get to it. Bear with me for a second. All right. Uncle Mark. Got me on Uncle Mark. Gee whiz. And then there was my favorite. I called him Zamfir. Tim's alluded to it a little bit. Zamfir, remember the old commercials? Zamfir, master of the pan flute. If you knew Mark, you also knew he was an incredible musician. The guitar, bass, piano, drums, pan flute, you name it, he could play it and crush it. Me, I could sing. Yay. He had a better voice, too. He came over one time, and we had just been gifted a piano by a friend at work. Emily was playing something, and I'm over there just so happy to see her plunking away. And she finishes, and Mark says something like, "The key of whatever above middle X needs to be tuned." I was like, "Middle what?" He said, "Well, basically," and I checked out. It still cracks me up. Back in 2005, my brother-in-law asked me to fill in as the lead singer for his band. That was a risky move. It sounded like fun, and I mentioned Mark's abilities on the drums, and thus Tricky Monkey 2.0 was formed. Now, officially, 1.0 was never disbanded. The original band members just stopped telling the former band leader and singer what was going on. So we held our oh, man. Whew, I think I dropped something. Oh, boy. We held our Friday night jam sessions right here in this chapel. Tim may not be aware of that.
You haven't seen the next video yet.
Our first official gig was Vintage Days at Fresno State that year in 2005, and we were pumped up. Big stage, thousands of people, we were ready to rock. Mark had to order a drum set because we couldn't use the one here at the church. It arrived like a couple days before the event, and this is so typical, but suffice it to say, I'm not sure Mark checked out all the specs. Once it was set up, it was like looking at the Hulk behind the wheel of a Prius. It was a junior set. No, it's the other way. It was like this. Oh, gosh. Mark rolled through it, and we played Vintage Days that year in front of our family and friends, which was not in the thousands, and on a stage about the size of a postage stamp. It was pretty funny, and we enjoyed it so much we did it again in 2006, but this time the stage was a little bit bigger, and Mark had a real drum set. But I can still picture him behind that junior set, pounding away with a huge smile on his face. God, he took that in stride. That was so funny. Most rehearsal nights, Mark and I got here before the other band members. No one in this sanctuary knows this story. No one. We got finished setting up early, and he sat at the piano, which was then over there, and this was over there. At least it was for rehearsals. We put it back. And he knew how much of an Eagles fan I was, and he started playing Desperado. I know, I love that song too. And that just happened to be one of my all-time favorite songs. So he starts playing, and I started singing. We got through the entire song with no music. No physical music to look at. He looked at me and he said, "Dang, you knew all the lyrics." I said, "That was the easy part. How did you do that?" We both laughed and went on with our practice, and to this day, I see and I hear Mark playing that piano whenever that song comes on. Our plan was to continue with the band, but when 3 of us in the band were expecting kids in 2007, that was the end of that adventure. Now, it was around this time that our family started spending our Sunday afternoons and evenings, and on a couple occasions Monday mornings, at the Gerlach home over on Nice and 168. It just became the thing to do after church, and it was a time for us to let the kids run around, to talk, and have Mark, and now Devin, absolutely crush me on Guitar Hero. Thank you. 4 years old, and he's killing it. What's the matter, Uncle Jimmy? Can't you see the words? It's pretty simple. Shut up, Devin. Love you. During this time, my kids were introduced to things like Gerlach-sized boxes of donuts, sludge, enough cheese bread at dinner to feed the Patton Third Army, and ice cream bowls that were bigger than our heads. There was no such thing as just a scoop when Mark was dishing out his homemade ice cream, and go big or go Gerlach was his motto. And if you're wondering what sludge is, it's kind of similar to the cake batter, but just pour some milk in a cup and add enough Hershey's chocolate powder to create a bonding agent. The kids loved it. There was one Sunday that year that we had planned to come over, and Mark said to wait a couple hours because he and Jen were going to a boat show. I hear you, Jen. I said, "You're getting a boat?" He said, "No, we're just looking." Baloney. Later that day, we caught up with them, and Mark had that look. "You bought a boat, didn't you?" I said, "Well, Jen did." I just laughed. But going through some old pics recently, I saw just how much we were out there with them and how thankful I was you bought that boat. Chapter 12. In 2008, Mark and Jen talked Julie and I into going to Disneyland with them for 5 days. Now, I'm going to go off script here because 5 days at Disneyland does not sound like a blast, but I'm going to tell you right now, that was the best vacation we ever had. Mark's birth parents, Steve and Kathy, as Tim mentioned earlier, even joined us for a day, and a tradition began that I will forever be thankful for. Mark brought up to Kathy that I was a big Cubs fan. Kathy is a huge Dodger fan, and she had some incredible season tickets at Dodger Stadium, the kind of seats where you reach over the wall and grab dirt. 60 feet from the visitor dugout. And she offered me the opportunity to go to a game. Between 2008 and 2018, there were only a couple times we were unable to attend a game together. Later on, our sons, Devin and Elijah, joined us. Each one was incredibly special, and I am forever grateful to have that opportunity to be together with him there. And I want to thank Kathy and Steve for their generosity in helping to create so many memories. After Mark and Jen moved to LA, we really tried spending each New Year's Eve with them. As you heard, that is Mark's birthday. Julie started a tradition of making him an ultimate carrot cake from scratch, which Mark loved. It was truly Gerlach worthy and weighed about 26 pounds. Mark would freeze what was left, which was about 25.8 pounds of it, and enjoy cake from there on. And I know those times brought Julie a lot of joy to do that for him. There was one trip we made, and I think it was in 2013. I might be wrong, but I think it was the day that Kelsey went and got her ears pierced. I think it was 2000. Your second pierce. Your second piercing. I think it was 2013. Anyways, I digress. But Jen and Julie took the kids out shopping, and Mark and I sat back on a Sunday and watched some NFL football. This was pre-Neil NFL football. The Raiders were playing the Jets, my team versus his. And to this day, I have no idea why he liked the Jets, and I'm guessing he probably told me, but he started the answer with basically, and that did it for me. So anyways, this particular game, Mark was a bit nervous. And when he was nervous, he'd start picking the skin around his thumbs. Oh, gosh. Dude, come on. But I didn't notice, and he got up and came back with a ball of yarn and a couple of knitting needles. Next thing I know, he had made a pair of pot holders. Now, a couple of things cracked me up about that day. First, was there anything that Mark didn't know how to do? And second, here's two guys with an empty house, no kids, no wives, watching our favorite teams play football, and one of us is knitting. That's Mark. I still picture him right there. Just like, what are you doing? I tried to get down and see Mark as time allowed these past few years since he was diagnosed. And each time I tried to spend some one-on-one time with him. There was a common theme to each conversation: how much he was going to miss Jen, Devin, Kelsey, and Ashley, and all his family and friends. But he knew where he was going. He just wanted to take us all with him. He also talked a lot about his love for the Lord and his verse, and I'd remind him that stop picking your thumbs and making needles. Just stop. I would be remiss. Okay, now I'm going to be a mess. I would be remiss to not mention how much I'm thankful for Jen, Devin, Kelsey, and Ashley. The amount of care, love, and support that you showed my friend this past few years was just amazing and an incredible testimony. And my thank you is inadequate, but it's all I've got. Over the course of 23 years, Mark became as close to me as any friend I ever had. He was, and still is, my brother. There will come a day when I join up with him up there and ask what the past years have been like, and he says, well, basically. And I can't wait for that. I love you, Mark. I will see you soon, brother.
Now you guys understand why that college group was so much fun. So much fun. Now, I will tell you this. Jim called me last week to chat about this occasion, about him speaking. He said, Tim, I've written it out. I've rehearsed it. It's just 10 minutes. I will make you all a promise. The sermon at the end will not be as long as that, okay? But it was awesome. It was awesome. Thank you. The family's put together a 10-minute video tribute to their husband and to their dad. And so sit back. Somebody once said, a picture paints 1,000 words. You're going to get $1 million story right now. Let's sit back and enjoy a pictorial tribute to Mark Andrew Gerlach. Great job, guys. Thank you. John Thomas Oakes. He's a musician in New York City. It was a chilly November in Manhattan, and he was playing at the Starbucks Cafe at 51st and Broadway. Others said it was the most lucrative Starbucks in the world. Tips were good if you played the tunes right. John was playing tunes from the 40s all the way to the 90s on his keyboard, and he was doing backup vocals along with his partner. He noticed there was a lady in the crowd that was sitting in a chair, kind of swaying and singing a little bit as they sang the song, "If You Don't Know Me By Now." Afterwards, she apologized for singing. John asked if she would like to join them with their next selection. And she asked him, if you could do a hymn. And he said, okay. And John picked "His Eye Is on the Sparrow." And everybody in Starbucks listened attentively as they sang together. I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. For His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. The people in Starbucks gave a thunderous applause at the conclusion of the song, and the guest vocalist, who was part of the audience, turned to John and said, "It's funny to me that you picked that hymn. That was my daughter's favorite song. She was 16. She passed away last week with a brain tumor. But I'm going to be okay. I keep trusting the Lord, and I keep singing His songs." Do you think all that was a coincidence at that moment on that block in Manhattan? Those people in that place, that hymn at that time? Do you think it's a coincidence that the first time I read that story was 3 days ago? I don't think so. The God that Mark believed in intervenes in our lives at just the right moment in this trouble-filled world that we live in. And God has been engaged in arranging encounters in human history since the very beginning of time. No coincidence. He found just the right time, just the right place, just the right pool hall for a grieving mom and a Starbucks and a struggling musician and coffee drinkers to pick that song. Since May of 2017, I've learned to call moments like that God wink moments. And more about that in a few minutes. But for the next couple of moments, I want to let Mark's favorite scriptures challenge and encourage us. In Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 through 13 read like this, and his verses are 6 and 13. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always, and I say again to you, rejoice." Now he says this right after he tells the folks in that church, there are two ladies in the congregation, they're fussing with each other, help them stop it. Help disagreeable folks stop being disagreeable. Because what we all ought to be doing is rejoicing in the Lord. And he said, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. Rejoice. The Lord is near. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving. Present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard our hearts and guard our minds in the person of Jesus Christ. Finally, whatever's true, noble, right, whatever's pure, lovely, admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think on these things. Whatever you've learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice. And then verse 13, I can do all things through Christ, who is my strength. Throughout this entire letter, Paul refers to the numerous thieves that try to step in and steal the joy out of our life. I suspect over these last several months, that thief has pecked away at your house from time to time, trying to steal your joy away. And Paul would say, and I believe your daddy would say, don't let him do it. Don't let him do it. These thieves are used by Satan on a daily basis in our lives, and Satan is identified as this kind of thief in the Gospel of John chapter 10, where the scripture says that he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. One of the thieves that steps in to steal our joy can be circumstances. You know, everything is fine until just like that, something happens and life falls apart and our joy tries to fly out the window. Another thief that we encounter are people, difficult people, hard to get along with people. As somebody one time said about their life, life would be really good if we didn't have to deal with people. People say things and do things that hurt. And when we hurt, our joy is almost stolen. Another thief is possessions. That's the craving we have for more and more and more. We're never satisfied. We don't have enough until we get more. And when we get that more, that's not enough. There's one more thing we need. Our joy is snatched away when the wrong thing happens, when the wrong person says something. It's snatched away when we can't get what we want. And it's certainly snatched away when we sit around and worry and get anxious. Obviously, that day that he was knitting, your Raiders were beating his Jets. Oh, well, what was he making a potholder for then? My goodness. This passage, Paul writes in chapter 4, he's addressing a problem of two people not getting along, being disagreeable. And by the way, it's the only time that these two women are mentioned in Scripture. How about that for an epitaph? We were disagreeable. That's all you know about those ladies. But as no surprise that a passage on the topic of worry and anxiety opens with a disagreement, Paul mentions several things here of how we're to deal with these kind of things in our life. He says, do everything to get the disagreeable folks agreeable, because fighting tears up a church and it destroys a family. Fighting never accomplishes anything healthy. He goes on to say, we need to remember the importance of God's work. He says, the names of these women are written in the book of life. They're believers and they're valuable to God. Don't toss them aside. And then he goes on to say, hey, in this world, believers have difficulties. We're not perfect people. We've not arrived. And one of the things that can prove that we have not arrived is we know how to worry with the best of folks. We know how to become anxious with the best of them. Look at the advice Paul gives here on how to deal with worry and anxiety. 3 thoughts, he says, that will produce peace and give strength. Number 1, rejoice in the Lord. This is a choice that we make. Rejoice. As Paul writes these words, Paul was imprisoned. He was chained to a guard 24/7. No exercise, no sack machines, no chance to talk with other inmates. The one thing he did have time to do with the time on his hands was to serve God in the place that he was. And in the midst of that bleak environment, Paul learned to keep his joy, his happiness. And he said the key to this is choose to rejoice. When? Always. Where? Everywhere. Why? Because the Lord is here. Paul's reminding us that no matter where we are, no matter what is happening, remember, Christ is present with you. He's in prison. He's in birth. He's in life. He's in sickness. He's in tragedy. He's here. And as a result, you and I should rejoice. When? Always. The second thing he tells us to do after we rejoice is rethink. Rethink our situation. Verses 6 through 8 covers that. Verse 6 can be shortened to 6 words, and we really need these 6 words to get through life. These 6 words are this: worry about nothing, pray about everything. Would you say that with me? Worry about nothing, pray about everything. One more time. Worry about nothing, pray about everything. Plant these words in your mind and in your heart. Focus on them, memorize them, and then ask yourself, what is it that qualifies as worry in my life? Here it is: anything that drains our supply of joy. When our joy seems to be depleting, we need to remember, worry about nothing, pray about everything. Anything that you are unable to control, that is what causes most anxiety attacks. Life feels out of control. And anyone or anything that frightens us, that keeps us awake at night. Paul says once we make this list of the things that are causing worry and anxiety in our life, now we need to switch everything away from worry and anxiety, take them off that list, and put them on our prayer list. Give every worry, give every thought, everything big, everything small, anything that you're anxious about, give it to the Lord. Now, I don't mean to make this sound trite or simple, because it's not. There are some people who are really good at being anxious. I mean, they could be a professional worrier. They're good at it 24/7. If you look closely here, Paul gives us 3 key words: rejoice, relax, and rest. These are the 3 substitutes for worry: rejoice, relax, rest. Paul gives us this advice: rethink your situation, reposition your list, refocus. You see, worry, and what does he tell us to think about? Those things that are true, those things that are noble, those things that are right, those things that are pure, those things that are lovely, those things that are admirable. Think about the wonderful qualities of your dad, and that this was his favorite verse, and let that get you through your tough moments. You see, worry can cancel out our ability to rejoice and be thankful. Worry can cancel out our ability to relax and unwind, and worry can cancel out our ability to rest and be refreshed. But here's the good news. These 3, rejoicing, relaxing, and rest, can also cancel out worry. So which direction do you want to go? Do you want to go from rest, relax, and rejoicing to worry? Or do you want to move from worry to rejoicing, relaxing, and resting? And then last of all, he says, don't forget to practice. He said, these things that I taught you, put them into what? Practice. In other words, if you've known the truth, you've heard the truth, it's been shared, in your case for your family, you've watched your dad model the truth in the worst of circumstances. And you 3 probably know this. Your mamas lived through exactly what you're going through. I remember doing your grandfather's service, and I am proud of your grandmother, and I am proud of your mama and your aunt. Those were tough moments. And if you don't think they understand, they do. And I can't tell you they were perfect folks. They're not. But what I can tell you is they've learned how to practice the truths of the Scripture, and it's made the difference in their life. Remember, this was your daddy's favorite verse. If we could receive a letter from God on the subject of worry, I think it would sound a little bit like this. Good afternoon, kids. I'm God. Today I'm going to handle all of your problems. Please remember something. I don't need your help. If the devil happens to deliver a situation to you that you can't handle, please do not attempt to handle it on your own. Kindly put it in the SFJTD box. If y'all don't know what box that is something for Jesus to do box. It will be addressed in my time, not yours. Once the matter is placed into the box, do not hold on to it or attempt to remove it from the box. Holding on or removal will delay the resolution of the problem. If it is a situation that you think you are capable of handling, please consult me in prayer to be sure that this is the proper assumption, because it is not. I do not sleep and I do not slumber. There is no need for you to lose sleep. Rest, my child. If you need to contact me, I'm only a prayer away. I think that's what he says. And I think this is what Mark would love for us to discover today. Maybe Mark's life and this day honoring his life is an important intersection for some of you in your life. Maybe this is that moment I talked about just a few minutes ago. Maybe today for you was a God wink moment. It's a moment for you to get your life on track. You see, the wisest man who ever lived wrote Proverbs 16:9, which says, "In his heart a man devises his steps, but the Lord determines his ways." God knew the perfect day to take your dad, your husband, to heaven. We have some sadness here. Jimmy, you did a great job up here, even with that Dodger shirt on. You did a great job sharing with humor and passion your love for your friend. Our friend, Mark, couldn't be happier today. There is no sadness where he is. He understands what you and I are going through from a whole different perspective than we do. And he simply can't wait for us to join him someday. The Lord determines our ways. The wisest man who lived, his father wrote in Psalm 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord and he'll give you the desires of your heart. If the desire of your heart is to be with Mark one day, then you need to follow the instructions of delight yourself in Jesus Christ. Take this God Week moment to do something with it. Let me tell you why I call these moments God Week moments. It happened on a Thursday in May of 2017. I was in my office, which doesn't exist anymore. That's the triple wide trailer when I used to be trailer trash. And that's where my office was. And I was, it was after men's Bible study at 6 a.m. It ends at 6:45. And I was in my shorts, t-shirts, and flip-flops that day because that's the way I show up to men's Bible study when they start that early. I roll out of bed, throw on the quickest thing I can get on, and I come down here, I lead the study, we visit, and then they all, the guys who go to work, and the retired guys, they go to breakfast. And for me, sometimes it's my favorite time of the work week because I can have a couple of hours with nobody else in the office. No interruptions, no phone calls, nobody calls that early except that Thursday. That Thursday morning, I was sitting there taking that quiet time, and I was preparing for a memorial service the next day. And I was there, and I was engrossed in what I was doing, and the phone rings a little earlier than normal. In fact, it wasn't even 7:30, and it was the manager out at Fort Washington Country Club. And he was saying, Tim, I didn't call you earlier this week, and he said, I'm not worried about it because I know you never forget these kind of things, but you're also here usually an hour and a half early. And he said, today's the seniors tournament, and you promised to do a little devotional encouragement message at the flagpole and to have prayer before we kick off our seniors tournament. I'd done it for 3 years, and I had forgotten, completely forgotten. And I did something pastors are not supposed to do. I lied. And I said, oh yeah, that's today, right, I'll be right there. I said, just leaving my office. And man, I was running out of my office. Now, you can't show up at a country club in shorts, t-shirt, and flip-flops. I ran to the house, I jumped in the shower, I yell at my wife, and I tell Shelley, I said, lay me something out I can wear to the country club and pray. And I showered, got dressed, jumped in my car, and on the way there I'm praying with my eyes open because I'm driving. And I'm saying, Lord, I need an inspiration. I need something to share with these men today, and I have nothing. What am I going to tell them? At that moment, I looked down in between my seats, and there's a spine of a book sticking up. A lady had given me this book the previous Sunday at church and says, Pastor, I know how you love stories. I think you'll really like this book. I hadn't had a chance to read it. I hadn't even taken it out of my car. It's sitting there, spine up, looking at me. And remember, I just prayed for an inspiration, and here it is, God winks. That's all you got? What am I going to do with that? And as I'm arguing with God about what He's given me, I'm thinking, when did I learn to wink? When did I teach my boys to wink? What's the purpose of a wink? And all of a sudden I started realizing, wow, I learned to wink by doing this. And finally I got to where I could wink with both eyes. Taught my boys the same thing, but why do we wink? We wink to get somebody's attention, let them know we're thinking about them. We wink to see if they're interested, and we get a little interest back. We wink with the hope of a good and positive result. Have you ever noticed God wink at you? That's those little circumstances that have no explanation. That's that little coincidence that's crazy. It's the crossing of paths with somebody at just the right moment in life. And as I'm thinking about these things, I'm thinking, well, okay, maybe I can do something with this. And then God brings some thoughts to my head. And I'm thinking, wow, I had a God wink moment before I was ever alive. My dad, he'll be 96 in July. My dad was in a foxhole in Germany right before the Battle of Ramagdan. And as he tells the story, he's in there with another guy in the foxhole. And the guy asked my dad, do you know how to pray? At that moment, they pray, and my dad said, yeah, but I'm kind of hadn't been walking that way, lately. And he said, well, I think maybe we ought to get things squared away. And in that foxhole, they get their life squared away. The next day, that guy was killed, and my dad was blown up in a street fight in Germany. They threw my dad on the front hood of a Jeep, and they drove him back across the Rhine River. And about 50 yards the other side of the Rhine River, there's a big explosion, and the guy driving the Jeep says to my dad, you must be somebody important because you should be dead twice. They just blew up the bridge. They tell my dad he's not going to live to get to the next hospital. He's 96. He still has shrapnel embedded in his spine. That was a God-wink moment because I would have never been born had my dad died that day in World War II. Fast forward to my boys who are in elementary school at Dry Creek down the street. I'd just been at New Hope a few years. In fact, it was probably right about the time we started the college group, as I think about it. Ann Lindsay, the principal of Dry Creek, had appointed me to be part of a cross-cultural committee that was just being assembled in the city of Clovis. And all y'all are looking at this white, pasty-faced guy wondering why is somebody putting him on a cross-cultural committee. I am a card-carrying Choctaw Indian from Oklahoma. Unlike Elizabeth Warren, I've got the card. The other person she appointed was a gentleman who was Hispanic from Dry Creek, and the two of us went to a meeting. What nobody knew at that moment was I was considering resigning from church. I was considering resigning from ministry. I wasn't sure I was being effective. I wasn't sure this is what I was supposed to be doing. It was a miserable season in my life. And I was that close. We go to that meeting that evening, and it's late starting because the guy heading it up was late. And when he walks through the door, he comes in. He's about 6'6" and broad-shouldered and very dark complected. And the Hispanic guy I was with pokes me and said, "Tim, that is the biggest Mexican I've ever seen." And I looked at him and I said, I'm not sure he's Mexican. I said, I believe he's either Cherokee or maybe Choctaw. I said, he looks a lot like my grandpa. Well, he gets up and he introduces himself, and he said, I'm a full-blooded Choctaw from Oklahoma. When the meeting was over, I walk up to him, and I showed him my card, and I said, we might be related. He laughs, and he said, what do you do for a living? I said, well, I'm a pastor at a church down the street. He got a big smile on his face, and he started chuckling. He said, I'll never forget the first preacher I ever met. He said, I was on the reservation in Oklahoma, and he said there was this Baptist preacher that would come by every 3 or 4 months, and he would preach a weekend series of meetings on the reservation. And he said, I was a troubled kid. I was 11, 12 years old when this happened. He said, I was heading for prison if my life didn't change. And he said, one night after that preacher preached, he opened up an opportunity for us to get saved. And he said, I walked down an aisle of a brush arbor building that's just kind of like those things that you guys hang out in on the beach, but they have church services, one of those. And he said, I got up and I walked down an aisle and I gave my life to Christ that night, and it changed my life, and I've never regretted it. I've been a different man ever since I was 12 years old. He said, I'll never forget that preacher's name. His name was George McLean. About that moment, tears welled up in my eyes, and I reached in my wallet and I pulled out my driver's license and I showed it to him. And my full name is Timothy McLean Rowland. And my grandfather was George McLean. And I walked away from that meeting that night realizing, okay, God, I'm right where you have me. My grandfather never knew he made a difference in that young boy's life. He never knew what that young man's life turned out to be. We have no idea. Our responsibility is not to look at what the results are. Our responsibility is to simply obey Christ. God gives us those God-wink moment. Oh, by the way, the guy whose memorial service I was working on that Thursday morning that I lied about forgetting going to the golf course, do you know whose service I was doing? His name was Wayne Morgan. Do you know where we met? 2 years before at the flagpole at Fort Washington Country Club before they teed off for the seniors tournament that day. And do you know why I was doing his service? Because that day he asked if I had a business card. One of the rare times I did. And I handed it to him. And when he got home, he gave it to his wife. And on the back of the card it said, when I die, get this guy. God-wink moments, they're all around us. They're everywhere. And what are we going to choose to do? Let me close. If you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, I'm not asking you to become religious. I'm not asking you to be a Baptist or a Presbyterian, a Methodist. I'm not even asking you to ever come to New Hope Church, although we do have 3 services tomorrow at 8, 9:30. I'm asking you to do what a thief on a cross did one day. I'm asking you to do what Mark did one day. I'm asking for you to simply say, Lord Jesus, I've gone through life on my own enough. I've tried to find my own joy. I've tried to deal with my own worries. I've tried to figure out my own plan. I want to give my life to you. Tommy Dorsey was a black jazz musician from Atlanta. In the 1920s, he gained a certain amount of notoriety as the composer of jazz tunes with suggestive lyrics. But he gave all that up in 1926 to concentrate exclusively on writing spiritual music. One of his best-known songs was Peace in the Valley. There'll be peace in the valley someday. There'll be peace in the valley for me. There'll be no sadness, no sorrow, no trouble. There'll be peace in the valley for me. But the rest of the story deserves to be told. In 1932, times were very hard for Dorsey. He tried to survive the Depression as a working musician. It meant tough sledding. On top of that, his music was not accepted by a lot of people. Some said it was too worldly. It was the devil's music. Many years later, Dorsey would laugh about it and say, I got kicked out of some of the best churches in the land. But the real kick in the teeth came for him one night in St. Louis when he received a telegram informing him that his expectant wife had suddenly died. Dorsey was filled with grief, and his faith was shaken to the roots. But instead of plummeting into self-pity, he practiced what he knew from the Scriptures. And he did what he did best. He wrote music. And in the midst of the agony, here's the lyrics of a new song that Tom Dorsey wrote. Precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on. Let me stand. I am tired. I am weak. I am worn. Through the storm and through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord. Lead me home. It's exactly what Jesus did with Mark. He led him through the valley, and he took him home. Here's the deal, folks. God's winking at you today. Are you going to wink back and let him know that you're interested? It's a simple prayer. God, I want you and I need you. Would you come live in my life? Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. Jesus alone. Let's pray. Our Father, thank you for people you've brought into our life, and today I believe all of us in this room are exceedingly grateful for the privilege of having Mark as a friend, as a good friend, as a family member. We wouldn't be here otherwise, and we are so grateful, and we say thanks to you. Father, thank you for walking with him in places that we could not walk. And now I commit to you the needs of his wife and his kids and his family. I pray, Father, that they will rivet their attention on the same person that Mark riveted his attention on, and that was Jesus Christ. That we'll not let our emotions or our circumstances or our troubles in life dictate to us our behavior, but rather we will choose to practice what the Scripture has taught us. Father, anyone who's here today to honor Mark and they've never had a personal relationship with you, I trust this would be their God-wink moment, and they'll say, okay, I'm ready to put my faith and trust in the same Jesus that Mark did. I'm ready to begin to change the direction of my life. Thank you, Father, for what you'll teach us from this moment on. I trust you for their needs. I thank you in advance for the comfort you'll provide. And I trust you for all this in the name of Jesus.